Hello everyone. The topic of my research is podcast as a tool for improving listening comprehension. My research is aimed at verifying the effectiveness of using podcasts to improve pre-intermediate level student listening comprehension, to find out whether this kind of method results in maintaining motivation to further self-education, and to discover the influence of podcasts on students' communicative competence. So here are research questions. The first question is how popular listening to podcasts among Kazakhstani students. The second question is how podcasts can be implemented in improving EFL students' listening comprehension. The third question is the learning by podcasts is an effective way to improve listening skill, and does it influence other skills besides listening? And the last question is does listening to podcasts increase students' interest and motivation to learn English? My research is significant because listening comprehension provides a great input for learning and developing other skills. However, most teachers in our country underestimate the importance of teaching listening skill, and they pay more attention to the development of other skills. Whereas the main purpose of teaching English in our country is to reach meaningful interaction with foreigners, which requires high level of listening comprehension, which ensures learners' ability to build intercultural communication and to understand the speech of native and non-native speakers. By the end of research, I expect participants to improve their listening comprehension, pronunciation, and vocabulary as well, to continue using podcasts as a tool for improving listening skill after the experiment, to show better results, in other words, progress in post-test when comparing to pre-test scores, and to increase their intercultural communication competence through listening to speakers with different cultural background. According to Abdul Rahman, Basalam, and Bidoda, the integration of technological devices into classroom has allowed for portability and time-shifting opportunities for students and teachers. In addition, integrating technology into English as a second language classroom helps students not only to acquire a foreign language, but also to increase their motivation and self-confidence. Podcasts, for example, in the field of language teaching, offer a unique feature in the choice of content and repository of real or conversation materials that allow students to study at their own pace. In recent years, the relationship between podcasts and ELT area has been flourishing. For example, Hassan and Tan, who conducted a study, podcast applications in language learning, during their investigation discovered that podcasts can be very useful for learning almost all English skills. Ba and Elon also conducted another study, podcast for learning English pronunciation. They stated that learners agreed that podcasts improved their pronunciation in English. Golami and Mohammadi, in their experience on language learning through podcasts, they came to the conclusion that there was a significant increase in subjects' performance in integrating podcasting. Learners who had more contact with mobile learning via podcasting were more motivated to learn the language because they were attracted by the marriage of online and offline services. Patel, in his study, Effectiveness of the Podcast to Develop the Language Skills of Postgraduate Students, the use of the podcast in the language learning class were beneficial and useful than the use of the discussion method and chalk. For their part, Faramars and Bigari suggested that podcasts could be associated with learning programs, taking into account their content. In this regard, Lower and Donnelly states that with the podcast, learners' vocabularies were broadened, their communication and speaking skills improved, and their understanding of language developed. I conducted my research with the participation of 10 first year students at pre-intermediate level. The study was divided into 3 stages. The first stage consisted of taking interview of participants and questioning them about their current situation of practicing listening skill in order to identify what tools are popular among students nowadays and if they have any experience of working with podcasts. The second stage describes the process of implementation podcasts as a tool for improving listening skill and observations of students' perception of learning through podcasts selected by researcher in order to ensure appropriate audio and video files specifically intended for pre-intermediate level listeners. And the third stage shows the results of experiment with the participation of 10 students who have been using only podcasts to improve their listening skill. Before the experiment on pre-test, all 10 students got an A2 level, which is pre-intermediate, and after the experiment, 7 students got higher results. They got B1, which is intermediate level, and 3 students again got A2. So more than half students improved their listening comprehension with the usage of podcasts. At the end of experiment, students were asked to complete the last questionnaire. The questionnaire results show that in average, participants agree that regular listening to podcasts has very good impact on listening comprehension. Almost agree that listening to podcasts is enjoyable, agree that podcast is a very convenient tool to use, and agree to continue using podcasts in further self-education, which means that the hypothesis of this research was proved. On the basis of observations and students' comments and feedbacks, the following features were compiled to emphasize the didactic potential of podcasts. So first, podcasts are authentic. Most podcasts are created by native speakers in the countries of the language being studied. Therefore, they not only represent the socio-cultural reality, but demonstrate a combination of verbal and non-verbal codes of foreign language communication. Second, versatility. Podcasts are multifunctional, as with their help you can develop several types of speech activity: reading, speaking, writing, and listening. Third, competence in the field of media. To work with podcasts, basic computer skills should be formed. The ability to download files from the internet, transfer them to mobile devices, edit and re-encode if necessary. Relevance. The podcast service allows you to subscribe to receive new podcasts and regularly update your archive with new audio and video materials. Thus, every day we can download a new audio and video file with information about current events in various spheres of life that can be used in English classes. Multi-channel perception is based on the simultaneous perception of visual and auditory information. Reception of information is carried out through the visual and auditory channels. The visual channel serves for the perception of objects, actions, thereby contributing to the comprehension of the sequence of sounds captured by the auditory channel. And motivation. Podcasts motivate students to learn their English, since podcasts prove that learning language can be interesting and usable at the same time. And compliance with the individual characteristics. The accessibility of technical equipment used allows you to access podcasts at any time, including outside the school. Access to a learning tool such as podcasts outside of a classroom. Training provides a chance to learn a foreign language in your free, and the opportunity to work in accordance with individual In the conclusion, we can say that the purpose of this research was achieved and hypothesis was proved. And we can say that podcasts can suit any learner, but it depends on if you find the topic that you are interested in and you can relate to. you will find podcasts interesting and useful tool for learning language. But however, it was noticed that podcasts suit students with cognitive and personality learning styles because they easily get information orally, while students with sensory learning styles fail to have good results using podcasts since they prefer visual, tactile, and kinesthetic or physical activities, so they more prefer watching videos and watching animated pictures. They cannot just sit and listen to the text.